Hey everybody, welcome back. Today's video is part 2 of a 3-part series where we are answering the question, is it okay to doubt that there is life after death? Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, Stacy and I went on a vacation to the mountains out west. We love to hike and take pictures and be outside in the fresh mountain air on a cool fall morning. So one day we geared up and headed for the trails. We got an early start to catch the ferry, which would take us across Jenny Lake just before the trailhead of a place called Inspiration Point. There was only one problem with our plan. The ferry to take us across the lake was shut down for the season, which meant that the only way to get where we were wanting to go was to add another 5 miles round trip to go around the lake instead of across it. It took a little while longer than we had anticipated, but at last we made it to the other side. We started our hike up the mountain, where we came across a fork in the trail with one of those trail signs. You know the ones, with the little arrows pointing this way and that to tell you which way to go and how long until you get there. So it wasn't originally where we had planned on traveling, but we noticed a sign for a trail to a place called Hidden Falls. We pulled out the trail map and noticed that we'd have enough time to make it to Hidden Falls and Inspiration Point with plenty of time before sundown. So off we went, hiking through the trees. The hike to Hidden Falls was pleasant, but nothing especially remarkable. Sometimes trails are like that though. You get lost in the back and forth until you finally reach the destination, and once you get there, it's like, wow. That was not one of those trails though. Not only was the hike unexceptional, but the waterfall itself, the destination, wasn't much to write home about either. Now don't get me wrong, it was pretty, but it wasn't something that we hadn't already seen before. The trail which normally connected Hidden Falls to Inspiration Point had been closed due to a rock slide that had happened just a couple of weeks before, so we had to turn around and go back again to the fork in the trail with that little trail sign where we had veered off of our original course. We were finally heading to Inspiration Point, the place we had intended on traveling to all along. After just a little while, Stacy and I were blown away by what we had found. The muted fall greens, the yellow turning leaves, the bright blue sky, the silvery granite rocks, it was beautiful. And when we got all the way up to Inspiration Point, the view was astounding. You could see for miles and miles and miles. We looked out and saw some of the boaters and fishermen on the lake. We saw animals off in the distance soaking up the beauty of the day. Now the sun had started its descent behind the mountain peaks, and so after about an hour of taking in all of that beauty around us, the time had come for us to hike back down the mountains. When we got almost to the bottom, we arrived for the third time to that fork in the trail with that wooden familiar trail sign. We overheard a couple standing there talking back and forth about which trail they'd rather go on. See, the sun was getting lower by the minute, and they'd only have time to make it to one destination. So, since Stacy and I had been down both paths, we talked to them for a couple of minutes and told them the better way to go. Hidden Falls is fine, we said, but Inspiration Point is where you want to be. The trail is prettier and the destination is unbelievable. There's really no comparison between the two. The couple thanked us and went on their way. It wasn't until a couple of years after that day that I was reading the book of Ecclesiastes and I realized something. That hike to Inspiration Point was like a metaphor for what Solomon is trying to teach us in his writings. See, in his book, King Solomon was on a hike down from the mountaintop, and the sun was setting on his time here on earth. Before he left the trails, he saw you and me standing there deciding which way we were going to go. Do we run after making a name for ourselves, for money, for stuff, for pleasure? So Solomon wrote us a book explaining that he had hiked all the way down every trail you could imagine. He'd made a name for himself. He'd amassed greatness and wealth. He had more stuff than you could imagine. He experienced every pleasure known to man. But at the end of the day, he's pointing us to Inspiration Point. That's where you want to be. The trail is prettier, and the destination is unbelievable. There's really no comparison between the two. So in this story, what is Inspiration Point? Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13 says this: "The conclusion when all has been heard is this: fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person." Solomon's saying, I've tried it the world's way. I've been down to the end of all of those paths. And this is what I've concluded. God's way is the best way. God's way of life is the greatest way to live. So love him with everything you've got and love your neighbor as yourself. Stay strong.